inspired by kingdom principles that work for you.
Thank you for watching Forward, Upward, Onward Together. My name is Carey, and I'm delighted that you've joined us in this very exciting discussion. And so we welcome a hospitality executive from Jamaica, and she and I will discuss issues surrounding the pandemic, issues around Jamaican cultural identity and how it fits in the tourist economy. And so we welcome Issia Thelwell. She is a sales and marketing executive of Roundhill Hotel and Villas with experience in customer service, social media management, communications, and management development. So Issia, welcome to Forward, Upward, Onward Together. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you so much for having me, Carey. Very excited to be a part of this conversation.
And so what's it been like in the last 8 months in Jamaica? You know, what has it been like with cases? Have you had a first and second wave by now?
Well, our ministry, meaning our Ministry of Health, has actually said that we are almost at the peak of our pandemic experience. So as recent as 11 o'clock Eastern, we have recorded 8,321 cases. We've unfortunately had 173 deaths, but we also have a recovery rate of 47%. So considering all variables, you know, I think our government agencies and, you know, the necessary ministries really have been doing the best that they can, considering, you know, what our social as well as our cultural variables are as an island to contain the pandemic.
So what have been some of the measures that your government has instituted in order to mitigate some of the spread of COVID?
Well, I know first and foremost, we all know that tourism is a big part of our country's livelihood, and I'm sure we're going to get to that a little later. But a few of the things that we've definitely done straight across the board, regardless of what part of the island you are, is that the government has made it mandatory to wear PPE gears, particularly, you know, your COVID masks that we are all accustomed to now in all public areas. So it's not specific to, you know, particular destinations or accommodations or attractions. It's straight across the board. Once you are in a public space, especially if it is that you are expecting to engage with other persons, you are required to have your mask on. Something else that's been made mandatory is for business places to have sanitization stations put in place, as well as mandatory temperature checks for all persons that are entering their premises. And if it is that they don't have a sanitization station erected, then there are usually personnel that are designated to, of course, provide sanitizers that are at least 70% of alcohol content. I know, as I mentioned, we are going to get to tourism, but one of the things we've definitely had to do as a country is implement particular curfews. So for, you know, just on a regular day, the curfew starts at 9 p.m. and then it goes up to 5 a.m. But considering holiday periods like this one, where Jamaicans are known to go out and have fun and fellowship and somewhat neglect their personal responsibility, like today, we have an earlier curfew. So it starts at 3 p.m. and it ends at 8 a.m. And just those are just some of the things that our government here on island has been doing to kind of curtail the spread of the virus.
So Issia, what is the holiday for those who may not know?
So this weekend, we're actually celebrating our Heroes Weekend, and it's really a celebration of our national heroes. So there are quite a few of them, and usually around this time, Jamaicans like to, you know, get together, not only celebrate where it is that we are coming from as a people or as a destination, but also to, you know, fellowship with family and friends and kind of reconcile, as well as to reconnect on the things that really make us who we are as a people out of many one.
So as we said, you know, at the beginning of our discussion, tourism is critical. We're a tourism dependent region. And so have your borders been open throughout the pandemic, Issia?
Yes. So we started accepting international visitors as early as June 1st. And of course, you know, as the developments of COVID happen, our government, as well as our Ministry of Tourism, including the Jamaica Tourist Board, has definitely been revising those protocols. So something that is still, in existence now is that we do require for residents from select parts of the world, namely the US, Brazil, Dominican Republic, Mexico, once they are 12 years and older, they are required to present a negative COVID test at the airline at the time of check-in.
So if I understand this right, it's those from destinations that are high risk.
Pretty much, yes. Particularly as it relates to Jamaica as a destination, because you do have a few other destinations that may be considered high risk relative to the remainder of the Caribbean, but not necessarily Jamaica. So those that I mentioned, the US, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Brazil, if it is that we have visitors that are 12 years and older, they are required to present a negative COVID test at the time of checking to their airline. Previously, we did have a system that required for visitors to upload that test, but it's more so of you presenting that negative test also when you get on island to our health officials as well as our customs and immigration officers.
So you have a rapid test on arrival, if I understand that correctly.
That's correct. And
Okay.
the sample collection is required to be no more than 10 days. Oh, 10 years. No more than 10 days old. So if it is, for instance, you're traveling October 20th, then your sample collection would have had to be October 11th.
So Issia, you're in a very unique position as well, and you are in sales and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
What's the demand looking like for guests or for persons who are interested in having a vacation in Jamaica or in the Caribbean? What are you hearing about the demand, what the demand will look like?
Well, I will say, one, I'm very proud to be a part of a destination that has definitely, maintained that competitive edge. We are still one of the leading destinations in the world. And I mean, once you think of the Caribbean, Jamaica is one of those destinations that definitely stand out. I think considering all the developments around the pandemic, a lot of travelers are really looking for value for their money, but at the same time, they're very particular about, health and safety concerns because of the pandemic, like all of us would be. So some of the, top things that they're looking for, of course, is confidence within the government officials, because of course you can't say, come to my country and you're not 100% confident or standing behind the narrative that you're delivering. I think another, just off the top of my head, something that a lot of our travelers are looking for is for people to be a little bit more relaxed with their penalties as well as their cancellation policies when traveling to the destination, because if anything else, COVID has really shown us that, you really can't predict the future, but you want to kind of protect those nickels and dimes that you save so much or put so much into to ensure that you can, experience life. A lot of persons are concerned or looking for, I should say, private accommodation. So for instance, the property I work at, I'm so blessed to be working at such a property because it's one of Jamaica's longest standing iconic hotels, the Round Hill Hotel and Villas. And we do see a lot of persons that are interested in that type of accommodation that gives you private accessibility. You have your own private dedicated staff. And in that way, it also helps us to control movement of people, but also reassures them that, there are restrictions or limitations in terms of access points within the perimeters. A lot of people are also looking for smaller and more intimately personalized experiences. Again, it allows us to control the movement of people, and it also helps to rebuild their confidence because, we hear so many conspiracy theories about the lifespan of the virus. So people want to make sure that, we're putting a lot of attention to detail and making sure that they have a safe and healthy vacation experience with us in Jamaica.
It's so important that one, guests feel safe,
Absolutely.
but you also mentioned the economics of it. Our guests are also facing a very uncertain economic future. And so they have to also feel as if they're getting, as you say, good value for their money, that they are, they don't know what their job situation may be like in the next 6 months. And so they still want to come on vacation, but they want to make sure that they're in a situation where they don't feel nickeled and dimed and that they're getting good value for money.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, you all have been dealing with COVID, but you've also had an election. What was an election like in Jamaica, Issia, during the age of COVID?
Well, I will say it's not something that the mass of the population was necessarily for. So there was a relatively low voters turnout compared to previous years. The election time, of course, separate and apart from the fact that it's an experience that really encourages people of all ages to exercise their democratic right to vote. It's also a time for us socially and culturally as well to fellowship. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people were not necessarily for the call of the election, but you did have, the other side of the fence that said, let's have it happen now because, COVID is not going anywhere. Life is going to go on, and we really need to ensure that we have a strong administration that's going to lead the way moving forward. So you did have, from my perspective, and speaking from a youthful perspective, you had a lot of persons that would have probably supported it more if there was a digital reform that happened, because of course we want to be a part of the vocal population that, of course is contributing to national development. But a lot of us, because of the age that we live in and the fact that we have so much access to information, we also want to own that personal responsibility to not contribute to the spread of the virus. So very, very interesting experience.
I would imagine so. These are very interesting times, and to have an election on top of it would have been fascinating to witness, I'm sure. And so Issia, if you were in the position of Mr. or Prime Minister, Honorable Andrew Holness,
Yes.
What would you do differently during this time? Or to say it differently, what suggestions would you have for him and his government, or even the Jamaica Hotel and Tourism Board?
Well, I mean, in terms of, I'll answer the question in two sections, if I may. If I were to do anything differently, I would have just been a little bit more strict in terms of the regulations, the protocols, and the policies that I'd put out. So as I've been mentioning, socially and culturally, we are a people that like to fellowship. We like to hug. We're very affectionate. We like the energy that we get when we're around people. But also we are the type of people you don't play with our money. So I feel as if there were more financial penalties and binding restrictions that people would have complied more, and people would have really own that personal responsibility more. I think the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Tourism, as well as the Office of the Prime Minister did a phenomenal job in terms of communication. They went a step further as to going into the communities, trying to sensitize people to the realities of the pandemic. But unfortunately, a lot of persons did not accept that reality until it was very close to home for them. So in terms of, just from a perspective of authority, I think we should have been a little bit more restrictive in the protocols that we put out. In terms of ensuring that, the industry rebounds, off the top of my head, I can definitely think of considering new emerging platforms or new emerging markets within the tourism industry. So let us look at, for instance, the markets. A lot of persons within the industry would have been dependent on the baby boomers because these are people that would have been cultured to traveling. They would have spent money. They'd have budgeted to spend that money. But with the restrictions now of COVID-19, where a lot of destinations are particularly keen on accepting visitors that are 65 and older, we need to more look at, how it is that the millennials travel, these braces, how it is that the Generation Z consider travel, as well as how it is that Generation C considers travel. And that's a new generation that our dear Minister of Tourism, Edmund Bartlett, recently coiled, considering the changes in trends. Another thing I would definitely do is engage more of the local and young creatives and make that a part of our marketing strategy as a destination. So the Jamaica Tourist Board, it's an award-winning tourist board, but I think there's also so much more that could be done. And a lot of travelers know, because of this digital age that we're looking to, they're not this digital age that we're living in, rather, they're not looking to go to the traditional means as much as they will the accessible sources through social media. And I think if it is that, we use the necessary hashtags and kind of collectively sensitize and incentivize collaborations, we'll definitely see some really good return on investments there.
So to your point, we have to make sure that we have all hands on deck, from the creatives to the millennials to our government agencies to our tourist board, just so that we can make sure that we can have the right kind of tourist recovery that we want.
Absolutely. And I mean, it goes even further because, of course, with these collaborations, we'll definitely engage more of the industries and not so much be not only a dependent country on tourism, but in terms of the region, if it is that, we're able to form linkages, through agriculture, arts and culture and entertainment, sports and science and technology. Not only are we strengthening the economy, but we're also encouraging foreign investors to come invest in the economy while we are somewhat protecting and preserving our local resources.
Issia, indeed, the COVID era will definitely allow us to have a reset in terms of a lot of our mindsets, the way that we do business, and the way that we really conceive tourism for our guests.
I'll say this. I'll put it in a nutshell. Life needs the Caribbean. It's definitely a rough patch at the moment, but it's with working with very professional and passionate people that we are going to come out on the other side of this stronger. COVID isn't going anywhere, as I'm sure we've all heard time and time again, but it's an opportunity for us to get creative, innovative, pivot, and really show, what we are made of as a Caribbean region.
So, Issia, how did you get involved in hospitality and tourism?
Funny enough, I actually went to school with the anticipation of becoming a doctor. And then during my pre-university days, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. And then when I needed to go to the University of the West Indies, my dad said, listen, I don't have any more money to waste. You need to make up your mind and decide what you want to do. So he kind of gave me a life-changing question. He said, you need to think about what it is that you could do for the rest of your life, no matter where it is you are in the world, no matter how much money you're making. And that's what you need to make your career path on. That's what you need to form your career path on. And I thought about it probably for about a second. And I said, that's easy. I could sell Jamaica. And I ended up starting at an all-inclusive resort. He said, if you don't like it after a year, fine, we'll go back to school. And that was 6 years ago.
And since then, you've been plugging away in the hospitality industry.
Yes.
It's a fun industry. It's dynamic. And I know that you're definitely a people's person. What other skills and attributes have really served you well and have been successful in your career in hospitality?
Well, in my younger days, I was a part of somewhat of a youth marketing group that really supported the creative industry in Jamaica. And I joined that group because I wanted to celebrate all the good things surrounding our culture. So, we'd hear not so good things about the dancehall and the reggae culture and that scene and that space. And I thought, as a young person, I had a voice to kind of nudge the artist and say, hey, you have a personal responsibility, whether or not you want to accept it, that you are a voice for the young people and you represent the young people in one way or another. And I think the experience that I've gotten from that definitely kind of opened my eyes to realize that, hey, people are people regardless of. And to some extent, I got early exposure in production. So in my line of work now, I literally anticipate every and anything. And instead of thinking of things as a problem, I actually think of them as opportunities and how I can form solutions.
So, Issia, if I understand this correctly, you were challenging other young people in the way that they behave and the way that they portray Jamaican culture. How was that received, and what was that experience like?
I mean, it's definitely an experience I learned from. Even to this day, I think because of how most people meet me, they try to put me in a box. But it was definitely a rewarding experience. I mean, it taught me actually from a very early age that I have a personal responsibility to hold other people responsible. And our popular culture sometimes gets a bad rap, but we definitely, as a mass population, have power in controlling the narrative. So I think to this day, to some extent, I somewhat contribute to that, and it's still a rewarding experience.
You know, Jamaica has a brand name from the days of Bob Marley and earlier, of really a dynamic bit of culture. And it's amazing that you, and it's terrific that you've been able to participate in that sphere and really being able to control the narrative. How do you think that Jamaica and other Caribbean countries can use culture and music to really be a form of sharing the islands and in a way, a form of an ambassadorial enterprise of sharing the culture with the world and even in developing a tourist economy?
Well, I mean, you started with a very good reference, Bob Marley. Bob Marley's song One Love is known as the song of the century. It was recently featured on The Voice. And the thing about music, along with things like sports, is regardless of your race, your creed, your language, your native language, it's just something that is able to connect people. And I think not only Jamaica, but as you know, Caribbean destinations and territories, if we really own what is truly ours and unique to us and share that with people in its most authentic sense, then they'll definitely appreciate it, because there's no other region in the world that you can go and have this unique experience. And there's nowhere else in the world that can replicate the essence of what that experience gives you.
You know, I think that that's why millions of people really come to the Caribbean. You know, is one, it's the warmth that people feel when they come here, but there's also something dynamic about the music and about the
Yep.
culture. If it's the food, if it's, you know, soca in Trinidad, if it's gumbe in the Bahamas, if it's reggae or and dancehall in Jamaica, that there's something that's very infectious about Caribbean culture that people really appreciate and that they really gravitate towards.
Absolutely. And also, just to add to what you said, it forces you, even if you're not that type of person, to be authentic. So you come here and we give you an authentic display of who we are. And I mean, naturally, you are compelled to kind of showcase who your authentic person is, whether or not it is that that's who you live out your reality to be. Once you're in the Caribbean, it just comes out.
You know, Issia, you've been involved in music, you've been involved in culture, you've been involved in hospitality at a local and a regional level. What's next for you, for Issia, if you wish to share?
Well, I mean, I am hoping that, I'll continue to make strides in the tourism industry. I do have my 5-year long-term and short-term goal, but I know 100% that I'm not leaving the tourism industry anytime soon. I'm blessed to be surrounded by leaders that believe in my potential and my passion. And it's really about connecting all the dots of, the things that you mentioned earlier, my love for tourism, my love for the culture, my love for music, production, really putting it all together and just sharing that with the world. And I think, in light of the direction that the world is going now, virtually, it's definitely an opportunity for me to challenge myself and pivot and share that.
You know, I think that we're going through a generational shift, and so it'll be interesting to see and to follow you, just to know where you will continue to make your mark. And so, really, congratulations. You know, to your point, there is an identity crisis is too hard of a word, but several Caribbean countries face. You know, not only are they looking at, what is, for example, dancehall or reggae, and how does it fit into the wider culture, but what is a Jamaican? What is a Bahamian? What is a Trinidadian? What is a Cuban? You know, and that's always devolved. You know, how have you seen that kind of identity play out in your experience in Jamaica?
Well, I will say, for one, a lot of young people growing up, and funny you asked that question, and I'll tell you why soon. A lot of the younger folks growing up are more eager to embrace what is truly them. So, for me, for instance, to some extent, I was required to kind of conform to European standards. But, my sister is a little bit more rebellious, for lack of a better term. And she's more willing to, connect with her African roots and, learn why it is that this was not accepted and how it is that she can be a part of the next revolution. And funny enough, today I said to someone that at the rate that we're going, a lot of us old folks are going to be employed by these younger folks because they're not afraid to apply their creativity and innovation. And I'm definitely someone that believes that innovation is what should lead and experience is what should drive the vehicle. But at this point in time, I still think that there are a lot of us within the region that are stuck, considering that it's experience that's at the forefront and it's innovation that we're trying to use to drive that vehicle.
It's definitely a tricky balance between, honoring those who have the experience and the wisdom, and, also making sure that those who bring the innovation and the data and the information are able, also having a seat at the table. And so it's definitely a balancing act that we have to play.
Absolutely. 100% agree with you there. And I mean, especially considering how quickly the times are changing and the fact that, this generation is for instant gratification. There's no telling what the future holds. You've just got to stick with the program and get with the program.
For sure, and let's use it to our advantage. There's so much information at our fingertips, and communication is so horizontal now, is that we could really communicate and reach so many people so quickly that faster than we've ever been able to do so in the history of the world.
Absolutely.
It has been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you. I wish you well in your personal endeavors. I wish you safety, and I wish you and the Jamaican hospitality industry a safe and prosperous reopening. And thank you, our viewing audience, for watching Forward, Upward, Onward together. See us next week, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for RBNTV.
You're watching RBNTV. We are networking, promoting, we're scoring points for you, proclaiming, declaring, here to encourage you. No matter the problem, we will enlighten you. We hear you, please listen. There is a point of view.